almost 90% of all those Arab and Muslims that were targeted in the United States post 9/11 were targeted because of their engagement with the Palestine issue. They had nothing to do with being members of Al-Qaeda, have no relationship whatsoever to what's so-called transnational terrorism.
There's been a very strong trend from Israel and its advocates since the September 11, 2001 attacks to portray Israel as part of a civilizational war where Israel is on the Western side and Israel's critics are on the side of the terrorists.
According to reports in Israeli newspapers in 2008, Prime Minister Netanyahu said 9/11 had been good for Israel. The attacks had swung American public opinion in its favor.
It's not surprising one of the largest cases that we had in this country was the shutting down of the Holy Land Foundation. If you look at all those that were targeted in relations to the Palestine-Israel conflict and their engagement politically.
Turns out there are 3 individuals currently working for what we'll call a mothership that used to work for the Holy Land Foundation.
3 former volunteers at the Holy Land Foundation are now involved with American Muslims for Palestine. None of these individuals has been accused of any wrongdoing in the United States.
So I'm thinking, aha, okay, terror financiers. I used to do this for a living. I used to work for the Treasury Department tracking terrorist money. I know these guys. What's going on here?
We have no affiliation with any foreign organization. We don't receive money from overseas. And this mothership organization is a very small organization.
But the pro-Israel advocacy class heard another message.
It was that the primary driver of the BDS movement in America is all populated by people who are former Hamas charity employees. This is not a grassroots organization. This is not a grassroots movement. It is being coordinated by very bad people, and it needs to be made known.
Think tanks like the FDD play an important role for Israel in the media. Their selective use of evidence is often presented as legitimate academic research.
They try to educate people to understand that Israel is effectively a Western liberal democracy in the sea of terrorist states, which is the Arab world. The other goal is to intimidate and to smear people.
Shanza is invited by pro-Israel congressmen to provide evidence before subcommittees on terrorism in the Middle East. He uses them to insinuate that prominent activists for Palestinian equal rights are linked to armed groups.
The AMP's founder and president, Hatem Bazian, was one of 2 featured speakers at a 2004 fundraising dinner in California. Incidentally, the other speaker at this dinner was Mohammed Al-Mazain, who is currently in jail for his role in the Holy Land Foundation and for providing financial support to Hamas.
When you enter it into the congressional record, now people are begin to think that there's some legitimacy to it. So this dumping of utter nonsense and garbage into the congressional record, into a legitimate hearing, will have an effect down the line.
There's also Osama Abu Ershad. He is currently the National Coordinator and Policy Director for AMP. Mr. Abu Ershad also runs a pro-Hamas newspaper in Virginia.
They made Palestine as a front on the war on terrorism. It was Al-Qaeda that attacked the United States. It wasn't Hamas or any Palestinian organization. It was Al-Qaeda.
I should note here that our open source research did not indicate that AMP or any of these individuals are currently involved in illegal activity.
He himself, in his testimony in Congress, he says, we have no evidence of any wrongdoing by this organization, but still you have to investigate them. So investigate us for what? For doing nothing wrong?
The fact it's rubbish does not mean that people don't listen to it, right?
Shanza's allegations that American students are somehow connected to armed groups in the Middle East has become part of the lobby's attempt to demonize BDS.
Organizations that have spread throughout the world via a network of carefully constructed proxies.
We should promote the fact that, according to Jonathan Schanzer, knows terrorism, he said a group of people who were active in funding Hamas have now formed a group, American Muslims for Palestine. Schanzer, testifying, said they're a leading driver of the BDS campaign. They're the most important sponsor and organizers of SJP. We have to make it clear in every way possible that they are being funded and trained by vicious lovers of Hamas.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hi everyone, how's it going?
Tony spoke again to his contacts at the Allgemeine newspaper. They want him to go undercover at a rally supporting BDS. They want Tony to find a connection between the activists he's supposed to spy on and the Holy Land Foundation.
There's a long history of crimes affiliated with the BDS movement that have been judged as such by US courts. For example, the Holy Land Foundation. Are these people still active and present within the movement? Who seems to be the people running the show here? Is there any acknowledgement of any sponsors?
This is an incestual business. You know, they're all interconnected. This is not me just spouting off because I'm paranoid. There have been actual cases, like the Holy Land case that happened a few years ago. A lot of these guys had worked with those people, and they themselves have not yet been indicted, but they're all interconnected. Part of the reason why that is so crucial is because when you're making lines from one organization to the other, eventually you make a line to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to Iran.
Sounds good. Well, we're grateful to have you. Let's see how it goes.
While he considered his undercover mission for the Allgemeine, Tony set up a meeting with Jonathan Schanzer. It was at the office of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
You too.
At their earlier meeting, Schanzer had stressed the importance of links that connected students who support BDS to the Holy Land Foundation and then Hamas. Now he was more downbeat. The lobby is apparently failing in its attempts to discredit the movement.
BDS has taken everybody's surprise. It's come up, behind everyone's back and bit them on the ass. Yeah, that's a complete mess. I can tell you that I don't think anybody's doing a good job. We're not even doing a good job. We did some good research, but we haven't figured out how to do anything with it.
Schanzer is unhappy that his alleged links between Students for Justice in Palestine and Hamas have not been publicized more widely.
The stuff that I shared with your group, our hope was to really, make this something that people could sink their teeth into, but no one has turned it into, no one's weaponized it, is probably the best way of describing it.
The slurs the lobby once relied on are no longer working.
Personally, I think anti-Semitism as a smear is not what it used to be.
Schanzer's now trying to link BDS to a small Palestinian faction that once was involved in militancy, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
So you got Hamas on one hand, you got PFLP on the other. Sooner or later, this stuff will come to light.
What have you found so far?
We'll come out with something when I've got enough. We found indications that there could be some research to produce.
Their strategy is to fill the pipeline of as much research and information that creates what I consider to be is the civil society assassination of Arab Muslim Palestinians in such a way that they will not have an entry into the debate.
Schanzer claims he's found yet another means of discrediting the BDS movement, this time connecting it to the Muslim Brotherhood.
The problem is the Muslim Brotherhood's not an illegal organization in the United States. So you can say that that's bad, but if there's no legal link, there's no, there's no law enforcement angle on any level, then it becomes really hard to win.
The Muslim Brotherhood is a loose international movement which endorses the political expression of Islamic values. Congress is now considering designating it as a terrorist organization.
They are moving right now with a bill to try to ban the Muslim Brotherhood movement. So the strategy that is being deployed, which is create the demonization, filling the garbage can with as much material as possible, especially from a Congress and Senate.
We've been dealing with the radical Islam from the Islamic Republic since 1979, the Muslim Brotherhood since the 1920s. You've got the Islamic State, you've got the Islamic Republic. Their hatred for Israel, their Islamist ideology is what really motivates the terrorism that they carry out.
You have to attack their weaknesses better than they attack your weaknesses. That's war.
Why they're doing this? Why they're going after our organizations? It's always connected to the issue of Palestine. They always try to connect us, to connect dots that they don't exist.
Terrorism is a very effective word. And what a lot of people in the lobby try to do is describe pro-Arab or pro-Palestinian groups as terrorist groups. There's no doubt that when you employ the tactic of identifying Muslim or Arab or Palestinian groups as terrorist organizations, that you're promoting Islamophobia.
Shanzer is a popular speaker at the pro-Israel campus events that Tony attends.
Hey, how are you?
Good to see you.
You too. Welcome.
A panel discussion at George Mason University is an opportunity to promote the FDD's research to a friendly audience.
My organization, FDD, earlier this year concluded a deep dive study into the fiscal and corporate sponsors of BDS, and we found several troubling connections to the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas, an Islamist supremacist organization that seeks nothing less than the annihilation of the state of Israel. I recently published research just this week showing that BDS groups get help from other Palestinian terrorist organizations like the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. The problem is that most students don't know who is behind BDS, and most Americans don't know, and this is why BDS is gaining traction.
AMP is the de facto national leadership of Students for Justice in Palestine. There is an actual direct connection between the people who are involved in raising money for Hamas and people who are involved in BDS activism on American campuses today.
Pollock claims that SJP is just a front to hide the real agenda of American Muslims for Palestine.
You'll notice their name is Students for Justice in Palestine. You don't hear the word Islamic, you don't hear the word Muslim in that name, and you hear the word justice, which is kind of a buzzword on campuses today. Everyone's for justice, right? You're not for injustice. The crowd that's kind of behind the scenes is actually a very Islamic radical cause. And if you actually get like into the weeds on SJP, they've aligned with groups that are for the, not just the destruction of Israel, the destruction of America.
That's a narrative that suits Israel because it takes the pressure off Israel to actually end what it's doing to Palestinians. But it's an incredibly dangerous narrative for the whole world, and I think we're all paying the price of it.
Pollock even accuses Jewish supporters of BDS of being in league with Hamas.
Jewish Voice for Peace, or as I call it, Jewish Voice for Hamas. It'd be like having a group called, like, you know, African Americans for Slavery. You know, it's like, it's crazy, right? A lot of the JVP people are not Jewish. They've had a real problem of like people basically pretending to be Jews because the anti-Israel activism it's a little more sexy.
You're here speaking with the rabbi. I work for Jewish Voice for Peace. I mean, we're a Jewish organization. I mean, again, I think that's another kind of absurd claim.
When you talk about SJP and when you talk about BDS, you talk about them as a hate group, as a movement that absolutely endorses violence against civilians, not military conflict, but violence against civilians, aka terrorism. You discredit the messenger as a way of discrediting the message.